a very, very good, strong carp float for bagging up on big fish. It's great for down the edge fishing, but it's also good when you're fishing in open water. Now this float is like the bigger brother of the muddy float what's in our range, and that's one of the most popular floats in the range, and people are using it all over the country for catching carp in the edge and also up to islands. We seem to find though, in some situations they are a little bit short when you're fishing in deeper margins, but also if you wanted to fish in open water with them. So that's what the idea behind the Munters float was. The float itself, very similar to the muddy float. It's got a 2mm bristle, a round body and a thick glass stem. Again, just to make it a very durable float, a very strong float for when you're catching lots of fish. Now I personally use these a lot when I'm fishing at western pools. There's a lot of deep margins on there, and this float, especially in the bigger sizes, is absolutely perfect for that. It just sits so well, it's lovely and strong, and it just works absolutely perfect for catching them fish when you've got them difficult deep edges where the muddy float would be too short. Now the sizes this float actually comes in are 0.25, 0.4 and 0.6, which tends to cover you for all your fishing from down the edge all the way through to fishing in open water on the bottom. It's a brilliant all-round float this for catching big carp on commercials, the Munters float. So shotting patterns for the Munters float. Like I say, this is a bit of a no-nonsense float this, so again, there's no point messing around with fancy shotting patterns. First size, the smaller size, is the 0.25. Now, this is a bit of a niche style float this, but what it's very good for is when you're fishing in deep edges and you're loose feeding bait, so maybe loose feeding meat or hard pellets, you tend to often find that you get a few fish sort of sat lingering off the bottom. So a slightly lighter float can be really, really good, where as you're laying it in, you can get some bites just as your rig's falling. So if it's ever that situation, that's the float that I tend to use. So this 0.25 is good for that. Now, if the fishing's really, really good, and I'm fishing like this down the edge, I'll just use a solid bulker shot. Now this float takes 4 number 9s. You could put more smaller shot on, but I don't see the point when you're fishing for big fish and fishing with big baits. So I just stick to a nice simple bulk of 4 number 9s. Now the beauty of using cubes, which I've used on this rig, is it gives you the option, again, if I feel like them fish are watching the bait, to just swap it to a bulk and 1 dropper shot, or even a spaced out bulk. But I tend to use just a bulk around a foot from the hook and 1 dropper shot like that. Now that just means you've got that little bit more fall in the bottom of the rig. If you feel like the fish are watching the bait, as you flip the rig in, it just gives you that bit more fall. But most of the time, to be fair, when you're catching down the margin and there's a lot of fish there, just a solid bulk with a short hook length, 3 or 4 inches, works perfectly. It's dead simple. Now, moving up, this is probably the size that I use mostly in this float. It's the 0.4. Now, if you know our muddy floats, they come in a 0.4. It just seems to be the perfect size when you're fishing down the edge. It's not too light that your rig's getting wafted about all over the place, but it's not too overly positive where you feel like it's sort of a bit overkill. It's just a nice all-round size when you're fishing down the edge. So when I go to western, I'm fishing the deep edges, I tend to use this one. So shotting pattern, like I say, no nonsense, fishing down the edge, 6 number 8s above my short little hook length, everything bolt down, nice and positive. Now again, if you wanted to use this float for fishing in open water, you could, and what I tend to do is I just slide them 5 shot up like I spoke about on the last rig and fish with a bulk and 1 dropper when I'm fishing in open water. But I tend to use this float primarily for fishing down the edge. Now the final one is a size that we included because some of the edges at Western and other venues that you're going to now, especially as banks are getting eroded away and things like that, are getting even deeper. And there's a few pegs on Stretton at Western which are sort of 5 or 6 foot down the edge, so you just need that slightly heavier float to get that stability that you need. So I've got a 0.6 version. Again, it's just that little bit longer. This also makes a brilliant float for open water carp fishing, short pole fishing, long pole fishing. And again, simple shotting pattern. This takes 8 or 9 number 8 cubes, and basically I just put them in a block when I'm fishing down the edge, and like I touched on, maybe in a bulk and 1 dropper if I wanted to fish it in open water. Such simple shotting patterns, but shotting patterns that are really effective with this Munters float when I'm fishing down the edge or in open water for carp.